you would. First up tonight, we have Michael Nielsen, not related to Leslie Nielsen, or Liam Neeson, or any other Neeson. He's just related to himself. When he grew... I don't know. Sometimes I say shit. He originally wanted to be a lawyer when he was growing up. He was like, nah, so I'm going to be a documentary filmmaker. He's really into Cabin Fever by New Glarus. Great beer. He also is into Tom Waits. That's pretty cool. Nerds and Nerdettes of Madison, get ready for a fun one. Put your hands together for Michael Nielsen!
This is a thrill to speak here. I've been here multiple times and a big fan of Nerd Nite, so it's cool to finally actually be here and share my nerdiness with you. Yeah, I am a filmmaker. I direct for documentary films, but I also do a lot of advertising. That's how we make our money. It is not a get-rich-quick scheme to make documentary films. Many people think it is. It's a real misunderstanding. Anyway, when I get hired to do advertising or when I'm making documentary films, my job, in many ways, is that of a smuggler. I have to smuggle in these ideas into these forms that you will then accept as an audience and not resist. That you don't even notice it's being said, but you just kind of accept it. And because if you do resist it, it's failed. You just check out and you're not a part of it anymore. So it's my job to try and smuggle these things in. And yes, it's just as cool as being Han Solo. That's how I think of myself anyway. This is me in film school as an arrogant little 18-year-old thinking he knew everything. I literally said the words to my parents before I went to film school that I've got this art thing down. All I need now is the money to make these films. I knew nothing. And I didn't realize that until I graduated from film school and only knew how to load like a 35mm film magazine and run the cameras, and that's all cool. It's a cool experience. But you graduate and you kind of go like, I don't really know what to do with this now. Like I know how to use these tools. I've worked with actors and I understand the theory and everything, but what do I actually do with this new power I have? So I ended up graduating and I came home and just did a lot of reading and staring at blank walls. This is my cat, by the way, Dot. She enjoys reading with me. She does give me some controversial titles from time to time, however. But yeah, I just staring at white walls, just thinking to myself, what is it that I'm going to do with this now? Because I've gone to film school instead of going to a four-year university, and I need to somehow employ myself. I need to somehow make this worthwhile. What is this all about? So, one of my favorite things about reading, and maybe you guys relate to this, is that you'll read a book, and something will pique your interest in that book that will lead to another book. And then something in that book will pique your interest and it'll lead you to another book. And it becomes this web of like exploration that leads from one topic to another. And as I was reading all these obvious people, like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino, all these obvious filmmakers and film theorists that all of us should look at if we're into film, this one name kept popping up over and over and over again that I'd never heard before, and that was Lev Kuleshov. And Lev Kuleshov was a Russian film theorist who started the first ever film school in the history of the world in Moscow. So, I did not know it at that point. I was not only on a journey of exploring my craft and understanding what I could do with it, I was also on a journey of understanding how our brains work and understanding why these things work in film and advertising. Why is a film so effective, and what does that reveal about the way that we all interact with each other and see the world day to day? So, with that, welcome to Exposed, Subliminal Messages in Movies and Advertising, or how Soviet Russia, Charlie Chaplin, and the Michelin Baby showed me that we're all hallucinating. So, let's start with Soviet Russia. 100 years ago, last year, I don't know if you all marked this in any way, but we celebrated, if you want to say celebrate, the 100-year anniversary of the Russian Revolution. And so yeah, this is Vladimir, a different Vladimir than the current one. This is Vladimir who? Lenin, thank you. I am the walrus, right? Anyway, so he took over after this revolution in Russia in 1917, towards the end of the First World War, and he assumed power over 160 million people who were largely illiterate. And he and the new Communist Party had to find some way to communicate the communist agenda to all these people who were farmers and peasants and people who couldn't read and couldn't accept any real way of disseminating messages like the Communist Manifesto and all these things. So this is also right around the time of the dawn of cinema. So the very first thing they start doing is they build the first ever film school in the history of the world in Moscow. It's still standing. That's a current picture. And one of the primary people there was Lev Kuleshov. And the situation they were encountering after this revolution was there were a lot of trade embargoes, and they were no longer accepting a lot of trade from other countries, so there was no raw film stock in Russia. So filmmakers had a film school, but no film to shoot anything. So what did they start doing? They started taking films that were already shot, movies that had been made prior to the revolution, some Americans, some from Europe, some from Russia, and they started cutting them into pieces and reassembling them in different orders to see what made them work, what made them tick. One of the big films that they worked with a lot was from D.W. Griffith, Intolerance, which any film buffs here know about. It was a hugely influential film in the United States, and they had cuts of this 3-hour-long silent film, and they would just rearrange everything and experiment with, okay, what does it mean if we take this close up, and instead of where D.W. Griffith put it, we're going to put it at the end of this thing instead. What does that do to our brains instead? How do we see that differently? What happens if we splice this and put it over here instead? And that's all they did at the film school for years. Until the 1920s, when suddenly the trade embargoes went down, and they were able to get raw film stock again. So what happens after you get all this raw film stock now with them again is they start actually making movies with a vengeance, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of things, the experiments that they did, and this is the way that Lev Kuleshov is known today. This is called the Kuleshov effect, and it is crazy. To me, this is, as a filmmaker, this is as close to real magic as I've ever seen in my life. And you're just going to have to put yourself 100 years ago to really appreciate this, but it's in every movie today as well. What you're going to see here is you're going to see a shot of a face from an unrelated film of one of the famous Russian actors of the time, and then you're going to see 3 shots juxtaposed with it. One that's a bowl of hot soup, one that is a woman in a coffin, or actually it's a little girl in a coffin in this version, and the third one is a woman laying on a couch seductively. Okay? Watch what happens as they splice this together in their experiments. So you see the hot soup and the face. And people saw that and they said, oh, he's hungry. Oh, he's sad, he's remorseful, he's mourning that child. Look at this lustful, dirty old man. But as you're catching on, because you're 100 years in the future, it's the same shot. It's the same face every time. But somehow, juxtaposing this shot of a human face with these objects that are completely unrelated creates a third idea in our minds as we watch it that is not there inherently in the shots themselves. As a matter of fact, V.I. Pudovkin, who was the guy who published the record of these experiments, went so far as to say the shots themselves in cinema are utterly meaningless. Cinema is created in the cut. So I read this and I was like, Eureka, what a breakthrough. I've got this figured out now. This is awesome. I've gone to film school. That whole arrogant thing comes right back. I've got it figured out now. I really do understand all this art stuff. So they start making this. They get the raw film stock, no longer experimenting, and they're actually able to shoot their real stuff. So how do you put this to use for propaganda? And by the way they would literally do this, just to give you an idea, you've ever seen those old pictures around like the 1860s when of the train with Abraham Lincoln would go out into the fields and be talking to the people out in the farmlands and whatnot? That's literally what they would do in Soviet Russia, except instead of Abraham Lincoln, you've got this screen up and they'd show these propaganda films to try and get people on board with the communist idea. So here's one. If we want to make people think poorly about capitalism. Oh, he's taking advantage of those people. Look how happy he is that he's taking advantage of these people. Capitalism sucks. And you just show this to these illiterate peasants. And that's the only message they're getting at that time. Here's another one. This one, if you want the opposite. You want someone to revere the dear leader? Oh, look at these people who are just revering this guy. They love what he's saying. They love it. Just cut it together, and people are going to think, yes, absolutely, he's absolutely our leader. He's the one to follow. You can create literally any idea that you want to communicate with these juxtaposition of images if you shoot the right ones and cut them together, you can create these third hidden meanings that are not inherently in the shots themselves. So I'm at this point, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the answer to what cinema is. Here's another example. If you want to express how the church and the czarist government is in cahoots, oh yeah, just cut that together with, oh, and now he's feeling his sword. Oh yes, don't trust the church. Don't trust it. This guy, by the way, this is from the film Battleship Potemkin. This guy literally twirls his mustache in this movie. It's like probably the earliest mustache twirling villain. It's pretty great. It's a pretty great mustache. So this was so effective, in fact, and this is what's amazing. This is so powerful and so effective that it can be used for good or ill, right? I mean, you could use this technique to get across any idea you want to get across. So much so that Joseph Goebbels had this to say. He's anti-communist, keep in mind. It's a marvelous film without equal in the cinema. Anyone who had no firm political conviction could become a Bolshevik after seeing the film. Bolshevik being the communist at the time. He was hugely admiring what the Russians had done with their film theory, and he applied it to Nazi Germany. So Leni Riefenstahl's film, Triumph of the Will, huge example of how this was applied. There were a number of those films made in Nazi Germany, but you can also use these exact same tools to communicate a ton of good ideas. So it's a morally neutral power. So, of course, as we all know, whenever you think you got it figured out, you don't have it figured out at all. That brings me to Charlie Chaplin and the Michelin Baby. I'm feeling pretty smug at this point in my film exploration. I'm feeling like I got it figured out, just like I did before film school. Only one problem: every movie I've ever loved doesn't follow this. These are all, what is this? This is Magnolia up here, Paul Thomas Anderson. Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino. Boogie Nights, Paul Thomas Anderson. Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese. Long shots, no cuts. How does this square with what Podovkin's talking about? The shot is utterly meaningless, cinema is made in the cut. This may not matter to just general audiences, but me as a filmmaker trying to understand how to wield this stuff, how do I explain this? Because I love this. This is fantastic, right? So many of us will watch films like this and it's almost like, a cinematic pissing contest. You're like, how long can they keep it going? And it's fantastically thrilling. But is that because I just had bad taste? Did I not realize, the kind of cinema I should be enjoying? No, actually, further exploration brought me to this film, The Great Dictator, 1940, Charlie Chaplin. Keep in mind at the time, Charlie Chaplin is trying to satirize the rise of Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany at this time, and he puts together this fantastic scene that all cinephiles have watched, which is the ballet with the globe. And I watched this, and it's a brilliant, brilliant scene. And something about this, after returning to it again and again and again, I felt like somehow the key to my riddle that I was trying to figure out was in this. Not to mention the fact that my favorite filmmaker of all time, Stanley Kubrick, always said that Sergei Eisenstein, who was another one of those Russian film theorists, and Charlie Chaplin were probably the two filmmakers that every film school should be teaching more than any, because they were the opposite of one another. Eisenstein was all about the cut. Chaplin was all about the content of the scene. And that unleashed something for me. That was a key to somehow figuring this all out. See the end of this? So, Charlie Chaplin is doing the same stuff philosophically that the Soviets did. It's just not in the cut. He's still combining two unrelated elements in the scene. You've got frickin' Adolf Hitler, or a stand-in for him, and then you've also got a ballet, a ridiculous kind of a thing that Hitler would never do. It's a frivolous scene where he's just playing around with this toy and then plays so much that it breaks. And what does this communicate? What does this third idea has created? Hitler is a little child that if we let him keep going the way he is, he's going to break the toy he's playing with, which is the world, which is everything. So, yeah, here we are, yes. Take this as you will. Yes, Trump was the question. Yes. Take this however you will, right. But anyway, it was kind of a breakthrough again, where I'm like, okay, so it's still the same kind of philosophy here. You're still clashing two or more ideas together, be it shots or elements in a scene, to create this hidden meaning, this third thing. Because again, the whole point and the whole job of filmmaking is to smuggle these ideas in. And it's not nefarious always. Like, if you went to a film and they didn't smuggle it in and instead told you overtly what they were trying to make you think, you'd tune that movie out. Like, it's not good craftsmanship. You'd feel it's being spoon-fed to you. You actually don't want to have us spell this out. You want to work for your meal like this. It's part of our human nature. So, given that that's the job, you start to realize what the recipe is here. Here's the Michelin Baby. So this is an advertising example.
I'm thinking about buying some Michelin radials.
How come?
Well, Michelin's really last.
What do you base that on?
Experience. I got 60,000 miles from my last set.
60? Pretty good. But your car's getting old. It's just not worth Michelin's anymore.
You're right. But who's buying them for the car?
Indeed. Who's buying them for the car?
Because so much is riding on your tires.
The reality is, that tagline's not needed at all, but some marketing agency thought they had to spell it out overtly. Just seeing the baby and the tire is the thing that survived. The baby and the tire, two elements combined to create a third idea of safety for our families, right? And that we needed to have these tires in order to protect our families, because so much is riding on our tires. Agencies want to overspell things out. That's cool. So this is something that is a way to communicate any idea in a way that's going to be accepted by an audience as entertainment and a way that they want to enjoy it. It's also, some people will go so far as to say, the essence of all creativity. And this took me a little bit longer, but it's fascinating. We don't have time to get into all of it, but all scientific exploration is combination. Even comedy, jokes are constructed literally by comparing two things together and seeing what that third meaning is. Here's an example. We mentioned Trump. You can eat the one marshmallow right now, or if you wait 15 minutes, I'll give you 2 marshmallows and swear you in as President of the United States. Two elements we're combining here, right? The huge power of the presidency of the United States and the social study on impulse control in children, right? And it creates this third idea that he's a child that has no impulse control. But it's the same stuff. You're just clashing different concepts together to create these third meanings. And filmmakers, particularly Andrew Stanton coined this as the unifying rule of 2 + 2. And that's a way of saying that you don't give the audience 4. Don't tell them overtly what you're trying to say. Give them 2 + 2 and let them put it together. A good analogy is, think about a chef. We're essentially showing you the ingredients and letting you taste the sauce before we make it. Like, you just need to look at this stuff and you taste an Italian dinner. That's the principle of how this works. But why does that work? Is that just magic? Is that something bizarre? You may at this point think this doesn't apply to you at all. Like, this is like, if I know about this, there's always some people out there that think advertising doesn't work on them. That's always really cute when that happens. But it works on all of us. All of us. Because this is how our brains work. Part 3, we're all hallucinating. If I were to walk into a room and show you a golf ball and a broken window, your logical conclusion would be, oh, that golf ball came through the window. But maybe it didn't. That could totally mislead you. That's circumstantial evidence in a criminal trial. You know, this sort of stuff happens all the time. The color of shirt of someone leaving a crime scene, right? There's in my new documentary that I'm actually working on, one of the DAs literally talks about the idea of, hey, circumstantial evidence is more powerful than direct evidence. Indeed it is, because it allows us to put the pieces together. He uses the example of if you were to leave your house with a jar of cookies on the counter, and you know your kid is the only one in the house, and you tell the neighbor, watch the door, make sure no one goes in or out, and then you come back an hour later and the cookies are gone, it's safe for you to make that rational idea that, oh, your kid made those cookies. Sure, probably, and we do this all the time. This is how we make our way through our days. We couldn't question little things like that all the time. It's just the high stakes ones we should probably question a little bit more. But it's something about how our brains work. Here's another example. How about prose? Because we did comedy. We've done, just literally walk around seeing things. How about written word? He went to the store. Fred died. Sharon went hungry and wept. Even if you know kind of where I'm going now, doesn't your brain for a moment want to connect all 3 of those? And go like, oh, Fred went to the store and then died, and that's why Sharon went hungry and wept. Like, we just naturally kind of try and find pairings and patterns and causality and things, even if they're not there at all. As a matter of fact, the research arm of the Department of Defense, DARPA, has invested a lot of money researching this very idea of causality and storytelling and communication for the war on terror, believe it or not. And they've come to this conclusion. There's probably a neuroscientist in the room, so correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is that the sensory receptors in the brain are not directly connected to the decision-making parts of the brain. There's a middle portion that interprets the raw sensory information into a way that makes sense for your decision-making part of your brain. So you are always receiving cooked data from yourself. You never get the raw stuff. So you're making patterns out of things all the time. Here's one other example. This is an experiment from the 1940s called the Hyder-Simmel experiment. They showed this film to children and adults alike, and everybody who watches this ascribes motivation to the shapes. That they're doing things to one another. That they're, the little circle here is now watching this confrontation. It's kind of hiding in the little house-like thing. And the big one, that one's aggressive to the little one. And all of a sudden, but there's nothing telling you that. These are just shapes on a screen. It's crazy what our brains do. But it also makes perfect sense because we evolved from much higher stake situations than we are today. These are left over from times when we needed to know why there was blood on that leaf and why, this tribe was doing that over there. Why are these things happening? We need to put these things together for survival. But it also misled us as often as it helped us. We needed Edmund Halley to come around to tell us that, oh no, that's actually not God sending a spark across the sky to punish us for something. That's just going to be here every 72 years, is Halley's Comet. We try to find these patterns as much as we possibly can because it's for our survival. Now it just lasts with us and we experience it today. So, in conclusion, I came through this journey not only more aware of what the power of my own craft was, but also as to what it is about my brain that makes me susceptible to these things. And the biggest lessons I learned was, number one, this is a power that can be wielded for good and evil all the time. So be as ethical as one can possibly be, and don't be smuggling in bad ideas to shit. Secondly, that the only antidote to this, quite frankly, in my opinion, is self-skepticism. That if I'm more likely the audience for something, for a commercial, for a movie, for something that might be telling me something, I should be more skeptical of myself than I am of something that I would reject immediately. Because we're doing this all the time to ourselves. So it is the closest thing, as I said before, to magic in my mind. It both thrills me and terrifies me, especially that DARPA's researching it. They say that the law says they can't use this research against us, but who knows? So I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. I think it tells us a lot about ourselves. I think it inspires humility and modesty. And at the same time, now, all of you, I would charge, look at the next film you watch, look at the next advertisement you watch. You will find this shit everywhere. Look at the cuts. What are they cutting from one thing to the next? What is that third meaning that's being created from that? In the content of the scene, the mise en scène, as the French say, what are the things being clashed together? The ideas being paired up and causality being drawn, because you will see what they're actually trying to say to you. So it's a fascinating subject to explore, and I really appreciate you taking the time to hear me out.
Keep it going for Michael. All right, so you guys can tweet your questions to @NerdNiteMadison. I'll be scrolling through them here. First up, if there is a neuroscientist in the room that can present on that,
Please.
What did you call it? Cortex connection?
Yes, right. The frontal lobes, I believe.
Cortex connection?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, that thing. I want to hear about that. Please. Also, I heard some people over here when there was the shape thing going on.
Oh, yeah.
Some people got real anxious at the end. Ooh, no.
It doesn't end up well, does it? No.
I was watching that last night. I was not happy at the end. Felt very bad. So one question for you. What is the best modern example of someone using the cut and kind of juxtaposing those things in your mind?
Well, so it depends on what you mean by modern. I can throw one out that I think most people here have seen, or at least in clips. 2001: A Space Odyssey has a fantastic example of this. Does everyone remember the scene with the apes when he has the bone at the very end? He throws the bone up, right? And then it comes back down as a spaceship. And in that split cut, you communicate all of human history. You communicate this idea of where we've been, where we've come from. It's a huge idea, like a Carl Sagan-style idea, communicated in this one cut. But like I said, honest to God, go watch a movie tonight. You will find examples of this. It's in everything. It's the very essence of the way this stuff is made. So,
Do you have a favorite director? So you showed some of your like long cut favorites. Like, do you have a favorite director?
probably Stanley Kubrick, just because he probably marries these things the most.
Cliche.
I know, but there's a reason it's a cliche.
Yeah.
He understands the cut and he understands the content, so he marries it very well.
Of those 3 long cuts that you showed, what's your favorite?
Oh man, probably Goodfellas. That has to be.
That's
It's
a good
also
one.
a cliche, but
Yeah.
you know, it's great. It's great.
So how many names did you have to memorize for this? There were a lot of Russian names that came through on this one.
I almost called Vladimir Lenin Putin.
No,
Believe it or not,
that's wrong.
I know it is wrong.
Yeah.
That's why I leaned on all of you. That's why I said Vladimir who. Believe it or not, I really blanked for a second.
That's
The
the audience helping him out. That's good.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your honesty.
I appreciate
That's
yeah,
good.
Right,
That's
right.
a nice thing.
You know, social lubrication, right? Yeah.
Kyle Nabilisi.
That guy.
Thanks.
He's been stalking me for years. This
He says, I love the 2001 Bone to Spaceship shot. Has Family Guy ruined the smash cut for modern film? And if you could maybe provide the backstory on that.
Well, I'm going to assume I know what he means. I don't think. No, I think it's using it in a wholly kind of chaotic way. It's basically an anti-plot Family Guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not, the cuts are not meant to be like a linear narrative. It's like literally just chaotic joke after joke after joke. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. That's good. That works.
It works. I sounded smart, even though I hadn't thought it through.
So that's fine. That's what I do most of the time too. Who's your documentarian? Who's your favorite documentarian?
Errol Morris.
Errol Morris.
Errol
Graduate of the UW.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Comes back fairly frequently, actually.
Yeah. And then last question.
He's all content, by the way. Watch
all
his
content.
reenactments. He does not bury much in the cut at all.
No.
He does it occasionally in the Thin Blue Line when he cuts between the license plates at the end and like communicating the idea of chaos and like we can't memorize this license plate and all this stuff. He does a little bit of it there, but if you watch more recent stuff, it's all mise en scène in the shot.
Yeah. So last question. So you were talking about the cut a lot. Does this relate to the term that I've heard in the rap songs called laying in the cut? I've been watching The Wire.
I gotta stay in my lane. I don't know what you're talking
You don't know? Okay,
about.
all right, never mind. That's fine.
I will say, about my lasting thought,
Yes,
I will
yeah.
say, is the Oscars are coming up. Think about this when they're awarding Best Editing. It's not about what's taken out. People misconstrue that a lot. How do you possibly judge Best Editing if you can't see what's taken out, right? It's this. It's what shots are put next to one another. That's what they award Best Editing to. So anyway.
Nice. Yeah. Good food for thought.
There you
Hey,
go.
give another big round of applause for Michael.